come live to you guys and chat with you about like thematic things that have happened so far in the season. Today's episode will be I'll be looking at like Arsenal transfers, the outgoing side of it, and and then I'll come back with another episode looking at the new signings and the integration um, of these new players, what that means for certain players that are still at the club that didn't leave. But I thought I'm gonna, get myself warmed up by talking about the outgoings because a lot of these players are, moving on, and the longer we don't look at them, the further away they are from memory and everything. And football is about people, and and I like to kind of like focus on some of the different players who are leaving as far as like where they're going and what this means for them, hopefully. Just to kind of like take an overall look at each individual case, not too long, like maybe like a little 3 minutes or less on each of these players. Um, and I'll go case by case and I'll share thoughts on some of them because they did contribute to Arsenal football's journey and to varying degrees for some of them, of course. And also just like Arsenal have struggled to sell players. And so I think this is something that's worth just talking about from the point of view of like what can the club do moving forward to do this better. I think it's understandable why the struggles have been there since like the late Wenger era, to then paying players to leave, to then starting to sell a little bit better. Um, and some of Arsenal's best sales recently are like, people like Emi Martinez and Joe Willock, right? And with both players, there's something to be said for like, when they were sold, they were actually performing quite well and could have helped the club at the time when they left. And it tends to be the case that Arsenal sell players when they're on the decline and when players are just frozen out. And this is something that I think gets placed on like the inability to sell players is something that's placed on the administrative side of the club. So your technical director, sporting director, board of directors, but actually the footballing technical team has a lot to do as well with how well a club sells or doesn't sell. And so, yeah, we're going to start talking about some of these players case by case. Um, there is obviously a lot of players that left um, at the beginning of the summer and throughout the summer. Arsenal lost players on free transfers and some of them for very small fees. So, like Nuno Tavares ends up playing at Lazio now. He had a good loan there after another decent one at Marseille. However, the issue with Nuno was he left after not having done well at Arsenal, so it was hard to sell him, right? And then doing well at Marseille. Funny enough, both of Nuno's loan spells from Arsenal were with Matteo Guendouzi. And I don't know what that means for the player, like Guendouzi. And I don't know if this is probably coincidence, but I don't know if there's a story there, like maybe they are good friends or they share an agent. I have no clue, but like they were together at Marseille and then they were together at Lazio. And Nuno made Arsenal about £5 million this this window. So at least there was a kickback from. Hold on, let me set up my YouTube stage here real quick. Save. Okay, then I'll be able to see if you guys are interacting with the chat or not. All right. So, Marquinhos, another player that, there's a lot in common with the players that are here, with the exception of Jorginho, Partey, and Tierney. Marquinhos left, he's back in Brazil. Jorginho left on a free, went back in Brazil too. Partey left on a free, he's now at Villarreal. KT, free, back to Celtic, and Tommy, contract termination. So there's not a whole lot that I'll spend time doing with these particular group here, but that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 names. And then there's a couple more who are like a little bit, who we will engage on a little bit more. We will start at Kivio. I think this is probably the best case of Arsenal selling a player while the iron is still hot, or while the stove is still hot on him. I think Kivio was at risk of probably needing to be let go for almost nothing, because up until Gabriel's injury, he had hardly had any minutes last season. And then Gabriel got injured. Kivio did exactly as he had done before once he'd had a good run in the team. Didn't let the team down, performed exceptionally well. Actually, he's not the reason Arsenal's season didn't end as well as many people hoped last season. And he, unfortunately, didn't want to stay in England. And I think AC Milan wanted him as well. But he had his heart set on Porto in this developing trend of players now kind of like saying to clubs, hey, I'm prepared to go there. And that's where you should try to get a deal. In Kivior, I think goes with many people's blessings, like after what he did last season and the season before. Arsenal bought him from Spezia a couple of winters ago for about, I want to say, 18 million pounds ish neighborhood. So I think it was like, something 50. I think it was like 20 million euros, somewhere thereabouts. Don't quote me on this, but the numbers were definitely not they were lower than what Arsenal are going to get in this loan with obligation to Porto, which I think is about 27 million euros, depending on who you believe. And 27 million euros for a player you got for roughly 20 is not too bad. And I think there's a 10% or something like that sell-on clause in that agreement with Porto. And Porto don't really pay a lot of money for players. So to get 27 million is actually as second highest that they've given another club for a transfer. So good business there, I would say. And I think Kivior deserves to play. It would have been nice, actually, if he'd been open to staying in Premier League, because I think that would have allowed Arsenal to maybe even earn more money, because he's a decent player, and I think he would have helped a Premier League team. I can think of Crystal Palace. I can think of clubs like Fulham, even clubs in that general area in the Premier League. I think he would have gotten a lot of minutes, and maybe even a lot of clubs in the Bundesliga too. And I know AC Milan wanted him, but it didn't seem like he wanted to go back to Italy. So he goes to play in Portugal with his international teammate Jan Bednarek. The next case, I think it kind of goes downhill from here for Arsenal in terms of outgoings. I think this is the best example of how to buy and sell players. The next case would be a deadline day, loan agreement with Nottingham Forest. Arsenal's former director, sporting director Edu, is now in Nottingham Forest. I don't know who initiated this one, but Zinchenko looks like he was going to be at Arsenal and not go anywhere until his contract runs out. I think the popular belief is that his contract runs out at the end of this season. I don't know if he I don't know if he had a lot of offers. So for him to have gotten, I know there was talk of Turkey, but he didn't seem like he was too keen on that, and so he stays and he goes to Nottingham Forest to play for Nuno. A sip of coffee. And I think, excuse me, guys, I think that's a decent deal for him. He's going to play for a team that's in Europe. He's going to bring experience to that locker room. He's a good enough player to get a lot of minutes in their left back position and in midfield. He'll get a lot more minutes than he would have gotten at Arsenal. And Arsenal are going to have to settle here for free up some room in the wage bill. I think Zinchenko was on about 150,000 a week, and so that's money moved off their wage bill. If you add that to the departures of Partey, KT, Jorginho, and Kivior was actually quite cheap. So Kivior is the best, way, like I said, to kind of like move on a player. Zinchenko, you're clearing up wage bill. You're not getting any money for him. You bought him for like 35-ish million pounds, and he is likely to leave for free if this is indeed the last year of his contract. The next one is Reece Nelson. Reece Reece doesn't look like he wants to leave London. I think there were offers for him from a variety of clubs. Um, there was even talk of Crystal Palace trying to get him for about £15 million. That didn't seem to work out for whatever reason. There was like a 48-hour period, I think, in the middle of last week, leading up to deadline, where there was talk of Reece going to Palace, possibly. Fulham, another London club, and he ends up at a London club at Brentford. I actually like this for the player. I think Reece Nelson to Brentford is as good as a deal that he could have gotten, because I think Fulham might be a little bit more stacked up front. I know he played when he was fit last year, but they've made some business now. And I think at Fulham, he may have had to share minutes a little bit more than he's likely to have to at Brentford. The one thing with Reece is that he has to stay fit. Reece's body has been a big roadblock for him hitting his potential. He's one of the best players on potential to come out of Hayland in the last 15 years or so. But I remember he had a couple of loans, even at Hoffenheim, where again injury was not helpful to him. He was also in the Netherlands. I think Feyenoord under Arne Slot actually. He got minutes. Like whenever he's available, coaches play him. But Reece needs to stay fit, and if he stays fit, I think this is going to be a great opportunity for him. And Brentford are going to have a player on their hands, because I know it's a straight loan from what I've read, but I think this is a perfect club situation for him. A club within London. It doesn't seem like he's a guy who travels very well outside of London, and he'll be able to see family. He'll be able to connect with friends. Yeah, I think Reece is going to be, as long as he stays fit, he's going to be one of the better Arsenal purchases that anybody has made, and alongside Kivior for sure. Zinchenko is another one who struggles with body stuff, but like I think Reece, if only he can stay fit, man. Like Arsenal would have had a player there, and now Brentford has an opportunity to have a player there, and if a club wants him next season, they have to see that he can stay fit. I think his career is going to be really, really hinging on this move. Karl Hein gets himself a move. I'm not going to talk too much about him because he hasn't really played a lot of games for the first team. But he was in Spain last year at Valladolid, and now he is going to Werder Bremen. Again, another loan. I don't know why Arsenal struggle with these players, but the market will tell you the value of your players. At the moment, Karl Hein, still an Arsenal player, and he's in the Bundesliga with Werder Bremen. A couple more Bundesliga loan deals on deadline for Arsenal. One, actually, no, this one is a permanent, sorry. Sambi Lokonga goes to Hamburg, newly promoted side in the Bundesliga. And Sambi, he had a hard time after leaving Arsenal. I thought he would actually find a home in Spain, in Seville, because that loan deal, he was getting minutes, but he's another player who gets injured at inopportune moments. Because I remember when he had a Premier League loan with Palace, injuries didn't help. He had another Premier League loan with Luton Town, and Sambi, his body actually let him down there because Luton was a team that was not all the way reliant on him, but he was trusted by Rob Edwards, and he was used every time he was available. He was trusted to play in that midfield and had some good showings in that season. Injuries, he couldn't stay fit. He was another punt in the Edu era, about 15 to 17 million pounds. So it's not a big loss, but it's a loss because he's still, a guy in his mid 20s. Was a captain at Anderlecht. Um, Came to Arsenal with a good reputation as a young, promising talent from Belgium, and he showed maturity to captain, a big Belgian team at such a young age. But I don't know what's going to happen here. It's a permanent deal. I don't know if Arsenal have gotten I think they're getting something under £5 million. I think I think this is a good move for him. Newly promoted side, the chance for him to get minutes. But for him, he just has to stay fit, man. Because if he does stay fit, whether Arsenal have a sell-on clause on that thing or not, like this is an opportunity for him to really kickstart his career. So I hope that Sambi at Hamburg works out for him. And to help this for him, he's not going to be by himself in terms of like Hamburg have agreed a loan deal for another Arsenal player who has struggled to find a space for him at the club, but he is definitely doing okay when he's shown minutes. Like at Arsenal, he did well at Arsenal when shown minutes. Had a very good loan at Porto last year. He wasn't pulling up trees or anything, but he got a lot of minutes and was a regular and consistent contributor um, in Porto's season last year. And we'll see what this one does. I think they have an option to purchase for 20 million. And if these two guys, Sambi and Fabio Vieira, can help Hamburg stay in the Bundesliga, that would be good for them because they will be playing top level football. And if they have a good showing, they'll be bought by a club, in a better situation than Hamburg. But I'll be watching. Hopefully, they have a good season, and that Fabio and Sambi can really kickstart their careers in a way that they were not able to over the last few seasons at Arsenal and while doing a loan here and there. So, in closing for this one, I just want to speak briefly on how Arsenal can improve. I know a lot of times we think it's on the technical director, sporting director, the board to make players, saleable and whatnot. And this is true, like that. And Andrea Berta has to do a job and sell players. But I think so much of this also rests on the technical team. That is Mikel Arteta, his coaching staff. I think they have to do a better job of not running assets to the ground. I know these are human beings, so you don't want to think of them as assets. But there's something to be said about Arteta and freezing players out. I know you have to play players on merit and all these different things. But I think Arsenal are going to continue to struggle to sell players if the clubs who are potentially buying know that you don't want the player. They know that you have an unhappy player. They know that no one else wants your player, so that they can wait it out, and then they can get a favorable loan deal and keep kind of like wearing contracts down until they have to pay maybe the last year of the contract. It happened with Guendouzi was an unhappy player, had to be let go, but we struggled to find money for him, play off his potential. But he was, he was a player probably who would be more in the kind of like he created maybe the situation. Emmy only became valuable. We got more money for Emmy because we played him and he showed what he could do, and then his career took off. And now he'd probably make Aston Villa more money than the £20 million that they bought him for. But 6 months before Aston Villa bought him, he would not have been worth £20 million. Joe Willock is another example, like of a player getting a good loan for a player, him succeeding at that loan club, and then you get good money for him. But too many times with us at Arsenal, like sometimes we take the best version of the player and we assume that that's who the player is. So, example, Gabriel Martinelli. This is the time to sell Martinelli. Probably you would not have gotten the £60 million that Arsenal apparently wanted for him, because club him at 40 because they see that he's not a performer like he looked that he could be or would be when we were looking at him when he was 19, 20, 21 years old. Now he's 23, 24, and he has kind of like hit a certain level of plateau maybe, or just like he's just flatlined a little bit. Still a player in there, but we hold on to players sometimes a little bit too long. And another example is not just Martinelli. Like I think, for example, this is before Arteta. We had an offer from Manchester City for Alexis, like 60 million or something like that. We didn't want to take it. He ended up leaving for a player exchange to Manchester United. So we have a history of like really holding on to players beyond the point at which you're going to get the best deal for him. And sometimes, Alexis, for example, was central to Arsenal's plans at the time when he was there. But Martinelli hasn't been a player of that stature that like you can't listen to offers for him. And yet Arsenal have refused to listen to offers and then let him go. And yet, like, you need to get players to get you to the next level. Like, I think we have too many times at Arsenal kept players that needed to be let go because we were like, he's going to blow up. But when you do that with almost every young talent, like, not all of them are going to hit. Not all of them are going to become Bukayo Saka. And we have a couple now who are, promising players. But being able to see the opportunity to sell a player for more than what you got for him is something that we need to do better. Because like once you give them these contracts, and I understand and sympathize with this position, by the way, giving players good contracts makes it harder for the majority of clubs in European football to buy, because Arsenal wages are bigger than a lot of clubs. So when you have a player on those wages, you probably have to you know discount on the transfer package. Like you have to maybe give up a little bit on the transfer um, amount that you're asking for, because the player still has to be paid by the club that they're going to. And a perfect example is Kivio. Like he was still on like 50, 60,000 pounds a week. That's good to have first team players who earn a reasonable amount, but not too much, into the 100s and 150s. And Martinelli is right now is on that big boy contract, pushing close between over 150 and under 200,000 pounds a week, kind of 180 ish. Like it's hard to sell players once they make that much money, especially when they are not doing the business. So I don't know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. But like, I really do think Arsenal have to um, figure this one out. Being a London club, being a club as big as they are, meaning that the wages are going to be high. What are some of the things that you guys think Arsenal can do to improve sales? Because this has to improve. Can't continue to be this way. Like spending close to 300 million and then making, under 50. That's not a route to sustainability. And I know the Cronkies have done a good job trying to be supportive to the club with putting out the wallets, but they're not going to be able to sustain it either. And their big thing is on self-sustainability. And at the moment, I don't think we are hitting those margins. I think we are just skating by there, and we're flirting too close to being in the danger. Two seasons ago, we couldn't buy Raya because we had to make it a loan to stay within the financial restrictions, and the Incapia one too was kind of a deal like that. So there's a lot of work to be done on this side, and that's why I decided to do this video. Please like, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. Cheers.